When I walked out on my wife that night, I never planned to come back. After losing our baby, our marriage became a battleground of blame and silence. I vanished without a trace, building a new life far away. But fate had other plans. A devastating accident forced me to return to Chicago, broken and vulnerable. Why, I never expected. She was still looking for me, and the woman I thought I'd never see again was about to knock on my door. My name is Mason Cooper. I'm 38 years old, and until last year, I was a senior web designer at Horizon Digital in Chicago. I had it all: a beautiful wife named Grace, a downtown condo with a view of Lake Michigan, and a career I'd built from the ground up over 15 years. I was the guy who came in early, stayed late, and delivered projects that made clients come back for more. But none of that mattered when artificial intelligence started doing my job faster, cheaper, and sometimes even better than I could. Grace and I met at a charity gala 7 years ago. She was the talented interior designer who caught my eye from across the room, confidently explaining her vision to a circle of impressed listeners. I still remember how she looked that night. Dark hair falling in waves around her shoulders, a deep blue dress that matched her eyes, and a smile that knocked the wind right out of me. "You're staring," my friend Jake had said, elbowing me in the ribs. "I'm appreciating art," I'd replied without taking my eyes off her. When I finally worked up the nerve to approach her, we clicked instantly. 3 years later, we were saying "I do" at a vineyard outside the city, surrounded by friends and family who believed, as we did, that we were perfect for each other. The first years of our marriage were everything I'd hoped for. We were partners in the truest sense, supporting each other's careers, making plans for the future, and creating a home that reflected both our personalities. When Grace told me she was pregnant just after our 4th anniversary, I felt like the luckiest man alive. I was in the middle of a client meeting when I got the call. Grace had collapsed at home. By the time I made it to the hospital, it was too late. She'd lost the baby and nearly her own life due to complications. I sat by her hospital bed for 3 days, watching her slip in and out of consciousness, praying to God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. "Mr. Cooper," the doctor had said, placing a hand on my shoulder, "your wife is stable now, but the trauma was significant. She'll need time and support to recover, both physically and emotionally." I nodded, determined to be the rock Grace needed. I had no idea then that the foundation of our marriage had already begun to crack, or that the worst storm of our lives was just beginning to gather on the horizon. Grace came home from the hospital a different woman. The vibrant, passionate designer I'd fallen in love with had been replaced by someone quieter, someone who moved through our condo like a ghost, touching things as if to make sure they were real. I told myself it was temporary. Grief has its timeline, and I needed to be patient. "Do you want some breakfast?" I asked one morning, about 2 weeks after she'd been discharged. I'd gotten up early to make her favorite blueberry pancakes. Grace stared at the plate I'd set in front of her. "I'm not hungry," she said flatly, pushing it away. "You need to eat something," I insisted, trying to keep my voice gentle. "The doctor said." "I know what the doctor said." Her sudden shout startled us both. "I'm sorry," she added immediately, rubbing her temples. I can't do this right now." That became a pattern. I'd reach out, and Grace would pull away. I'd try to talk about what happened, and she'd change the subject or leave the room. When I suggested grief counseling, she looked at me as if I'd suggested something shameful. "I don't need a stranger telling me how to feel," she said coldly. Nights were the worst. Grace would curl up on the far edge of our bed, facing away from me. Sometimes I'd wake to the sound of her crying in the bathroom, the shower running to mask the noise. When I knock on the door, she'd tell me she was fine, just needed some space. I threw myself into my work, staying at the office later and later, telling myself I was giving her the space she needed. In reality, I was avoiding the growing tension at home. But even my career, the one thing I thought I could count on, was starting to show cracks. "We need to talk about the Westfield project," my boss, Derek, said one afternoon, closing my office door behind him. "What about it?" I asked, looking up from my monitor. "Their deadline isn't for another 3 weeks. Derek shifted uncomfortably. They weren't thrilled with the initial designs. They're thinking of going with something more automated. Automated? You mean they want to use an AI design platform? I felt a knot forming in my stomach. They've been testing it and like the results. It's nothing personal, Mason. It's just business. But it felt personal. It felt like everything solid in my life was turning to sand beneath my feet. One evening, I came home earlier than usual, carrying takeout from Grace's favorite Thai restaurant, a peace offering of sorts. I found her sitting on our balcony, staring out at the Chicago skyline, a glass of wine in hand. "I thought we could have dinner together," I said, holding up the bag. Grace turned, and for a moment, I saw something like hope flicker in her eyes before it died again. "I already ate," she said. "Of course you did," I muttered, setting the bag down harder than necessary. "What's that supposed to mean?" Grace's voice had an edge I was becoming too familiar with. "Nothing. It doesn't mean anything. I was too tired for another fight that would go nowhere." "No, say what you're thinking," she challenged, standing up. "At least one of us should be honest." I didn't rise to the bait. Instead, I turned and walked away, wondering how much longer we could go on like this before something, or someone, broke completely. As weeks turned into months, I found myself wondering if Grace was seeing someone else. The thought gnawed at me during sleepless nights. She started coming home later, her explanations vague. Client meetings and project deadlines became her mantras. I wanted to believe her, but doubt is a powerful poison. One evening, while Grace was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked her phone. My hands trembled as I entered her passcode, feeling like a thief in my own home. I scrolled through her messages, emails, and call history, searching for evidence of betrayal. I found nothing. No suspicious texts, no unknown numbers called repeatedly, no incriminating emails. Part of me felt relieved, but another part felt even more confused. If there wasn't someone else, why was she pulling away so completely? Meanwhile, at work, things were deteriorating rapidly. More clients were choosing AI design solutions over human designers. The Westfield project was just the beginning. "We need to talk, Mason," Derek said during our monthly review. His expression was grim. "The company is restructuring the design department. We're reducing the team by 30%. I square my shoulders, meeting his gaze directly. "And I'm part of that 30%. It wasn't a question, but Derek nodded anyway. "I fought for you, but the numbers don't lie. AI-generated designs are cutting our costs by 60% while delivering comparable results." "Comparable isn't the same as better," I argued, keeping my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. "Those algorithms can't understand human emotion, can't connect with clients on a personal level." "I know that. You know that. But the board sees the bottom line," Derek sighed. "You'll get a generous severance package. I've also put together some recommendations if you want to freelance." I walked out of the building that afternoon with a cardboard box containing 7 years of my professional life and no idea what came next. I drove around Chicago for hours, avoiding going home to our empty condo, avoiding telling Grace that I'd failed at the one thing I thought I was good at. When I finally returned home, I found Grace sitting at our dining table, surrounded by design samples. "I need to tell you something," I said, setting down my box of belongings. She looked up, her eyes widening as she took in the box. "What happened?" "I lost my job. The AI revolution finally came for me." I tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. For a moment, something like compassion flickered across Grace's face. Then she looked away. "What are you going to do?" "Not we. You." The distinction wasn't lost on me. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I'll figure it out. I always do." I expected criticism, maybe even blame. Instead, Grace just nodded and returned to her samples, as if my career implosion was just another Tuesday. That night, I lay awake wondering how we'd become such strangers to each other. When had we stopped being partners, stopped facing life's challenges together? I made a decision then. I would fight for my career, fight for my marriage, fight for the life we planned together. I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. But morning brought another argument, another cold shoulder, and I found myself wondering if I was fighting for something that no longer existed. A month after losing my job, I was still struggling to find my footing. The severance package helped with bills, but freelance design work was harder to come by than Derek had suggested. Companies wanted AI-assisted designers who could operate the new platforms, not traditional designers like me. I started teaching myself the new AI design tools, spending hours at the library since we had to cancel our home internet to cut costs. Grace didn't complain about the budget cuts. She was too busy with a major project for some tech billionaire's vacation home, but I felt the weight of her silence. Every night, she came home later. Every morning, she left earlier. We should talk about what happens when the severance runs out, I said one rare evening when we were both home for dinner. Grace pushed food around her plate. What do you mean? I mean, we might need to consider downsizing. This condo. I'm not selling our home, she interrupted sharply. My career's going well. We can manage. It's not just about money, I tried to explain. It's about us, about where we're headed. We hardly see each other anymore, hardly talk. After everything that happened. Don't, Grace warned, her knuckles white around her fork. Don't bring that up. We need to talk about it sometime, Grace. We lost a child. The sound of her fork clattering against the plate silenced me. I lost a child, she corrected, her voice cold. I was the one who felt him growing inside me. I was the one who woke up in a pool of blood. You got a phone call. Her words hit like physical blows. I stood up, needing distance before I said something I couldn't take back. That's not fair, and you know it. I'm trying to help us heal, but you won't even let me in. Maybe I don't want your help, she shot back. Maybe I'm tired of you trying to fix everything, as if this is just another project with a deadline. Then what do you want from me? I demanded, frustration finally boiling over. Because I've tried everything I know how to do. I've given you space. I've tried talking. I backed off. Nothing works. Nothing reaches you. Grace stood up suddenly, grabbing her purse. I need some air, she muttered, heading for the door. It's after 9, I pointed out, following her. Where are you going? Out, was all she said before slamming the door behind her. I stood alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the remains of another failed attempt at connection. Something inside me snapped. If Grace wouldn't talk to me, maybe she'd talk to a professional. I called and made an appointment with a marriage counselor, leaving a message on Grace's phone with the details. That night, as I lay in our too-empty bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Can't make the appointment. Working. 3 words that seemed to sum up the state of our marriage. I stared at the ceiling, weighing options I'd never thought I'd have to consider. How much longer could we go on like this? How much more could I take before walking away, stopped feeling like giving up, and started feeling like survival? The breaking point came unexpectedly. I'd spent the day at a career fair, listening to tech companies describe their ideal candidates. Younger, more adaptable, fluent in AI platforms I was still struggling to master. By the time I got home, my confidence was at rock bottom. All I wanted was a quiet evening and maybe a cold beer. Instead, I found Grace packing a suitcase. What's going on? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. I'm staying at Diane's for a few days, she replied without looking up. Diane was her closest friend, someone who'd never particularly liked me. What? I demanded, a surge of frustration overriding my usual caution. Grace finally stopped packing and faced me. Because I can't do this anymore, Mason. I can't live like we're just roommates circling each other, waiting for something to change. So your solution is to leave? That's going to fix things. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. Nothing is fixing things, Grace shouted, her composure finally cracking. Not time, not space, not your constant hovering and trying to talk about feelings I don't want to discuss. I stepped closer. You haven't even tried, Grace. You won't go to counseling. You won't talk to me. You won't let me in. Because you can't understand. Tears filled her eyes. You can't possibly understand what it feels like to lose a child that was growing inside you. I lost him too, I said, my voice breaking. He was my son too. It's not the same, Grace whispered, but some of the fire had gone out her voice. No, it's not the same, I agreed. But that doesn't mean my grief isn't real. That doesn't mean I haven't been hurting too. We stood facing each other. The truth we'd been avoiding for months finally laid bare between us. Grace wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I need to go, she said finally, zipping her suitcase closed. I need to figure out if this marriage is something I can still save. If you can save, I echoed. This isn't just on you, Grace. It takes both of us. Then why does it feel like I'm the only one drowning? She asked. I watched her gather her things, feeling oddly calm. Something had shifted inside me. As she headed for the door, I made a decision that surprised even me. I'll be gone when you get back, I said quietly. Grace froze, turning slowly to face me. What? You need space. I'll give it to you. All of it. I met her gaze steadily. Take your time at Diane's. When you come back, I won't be here. Mason, that's not what It's what we both need, I interrupted. A clean break. No more circling each other. No more half measures. She stared at me, searching my face for something. Hesitation, perhaps, or signs I didn't mean it. But my mind was made up. Whatever came next, it couldn't be worse than this slow, painful disintegration of everything we'd built together. After Grace left, I sat alone in our silent condo, planning my escape from a life that no longer felt like mine. I left without saying goodbye. No note, no explanation beyond our final conversation. Maybe that makes me a coward, but words seemed pointless after months of talking in circles. I packed essentials while Grace was at Diane's. Clothes, my laptop, important documents, and what little cash I had left after the layoff. I withdrew the remaining money from our joint account, barely enough for a few weeks if I was careful, and left my keys on the kitchen counter. Walking out of the building with my life condensed into a duffel bag and backpack felt surreal, like I was watching someone else make this decision. But with each step, a strange lightness grew in my chest. For the first time in months, I was taking action instead of just reacting. I drove north with no real destination in mind, just a vague notion of finding somewhere quiet to regroup. Lake Michigan became my compass. I followed its shoreline until the city lights faded behind me and the road opened up ahead. Near a small town called Harbor Springs, I spotted a cabin for rent sign on a rural mailbox. The place was little more than a glorified shed on the edge of the woods, but had electricity, running water, and most importantly, no memories of Grace. The elderly owner, Ed, seemed unconcerned with my lack of employment or references. Rent's due first of the month, cash only. Keep the place standing and we'll get along fine, he said, handing me a rusty key. That first night alone in the cabin, I sat on the porch watching stars appear over the lake. The silence was absolute. No traffic noise, no neighbors, no tension-filled space between two people who couldn't find their way back to each other. I breathed deeply, filling my lungs with pine-scented air, and felt something inside me begin to unclench. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't experienced in months. I needed income, and fast. Opening my laptop, I set up profiles on every freelance design platform I could find. My pitch was simple: experienced designer retraining in AI-assisted tools, offering services at competitive rates, while building my portfolio in new technologies. To my surprise, work started trickling in almost immediately. Small businesses who couldn't afford fully automated solutions but needed design help. I spent 16 hours a day teaching myself new programs and completing projects, falling into bed exhausted but with a sense of accomplishment that had been missing for too long. I didn't contact Grace. I didn't check social media to see if she was looking for me. I simply disappeared, shedding my old life like a snake discarding an outgrown skin. Some nights, lying on the cabin's lumpy mattress, I wondered if she was worried, if she missed me, if she was angry at my abrupt departure. Other nights, I slept dreamlessly, unburdened by the weight of our shared grief and growing resentment. 3 weeks into my self-imposed exile, I realized I hadn't thought about Chicago or my old job, or even Grace for an entire day. The revelation should have troubled me. Instead, it felt like the first real healing in a year of open wounds. 2 months into my new life, I barely recognized the man I'd become. My beard had grown thick, my city pallor replaced by a healthy tan from working outdoors. Ed, my landlord, had started hiring me for odd jobs around his property, fixing the sagging porch on his house, repainting outbuildings, clearing brush. The physical labor was therapeutic, a welcome counterpoint to the digital design work that paid my bills. I'd settled into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Mornings began with coffee on the porch, watching mist rise off the lake. Days were split between freelance projects and manual work. Evenings were for reading or sketching or simply sitting under the stars, thinking about everything and nothing. I bought a used kayak from a local shop and started exploring the shoreline, finding hidden coves and deserted beaches. The vastness of Lake Michigan became a metaphor for my life, territory both intimidating and full of possibility. My phone remained off most days. I'd established a new email account for clients, and check my old one only occasionally. No messages from Grace. Whether she was giving me space or simply done with me, the result was the same: silence. Then came the accident. I was helping Ed replace rotted support beams under his deck when the temporary bracing gave way. 2,000 pounds of pressure caught my left leg, crushing it against the foundation. Ed's quick thinking saved me from worse. He used his truck jack to lift the deck just enough for me to pull free. The rural clinic wasn't equipped for complex injuries. "You need surgery," the doctor explained, studying my x-rays. "The tibia is shattered in 3 places. We can stabilize you, but you need specialists." "How much will that cost?" I asked, knowing my catastrophic coverage had lapsed with my employment. The doctor's expression told me everything. "Your best option is Chicago Northwestern. They have an excellent orthopedic team." Chicago. The place I'd worked so hard to escape. But lying there, drugged and desperate, I couldn't conjure any alternatives. Ed drove me to the train station the next morning, my leg immobilized in a temporary cast. "You sure there's someone to meet you?" he asked, concerned. I nodded, the lie easier than explanation. I had exactly one person to call in Chicago, my former boss, Derek. To his credit, Derek asked no questions when I called from the train. "I'll pick you up. You can stay with us until you're sorted." As the landscape outside changed from rural Michigan to Indiana suburbs to Chicago's familiar skyline, I wrestled with contradictory emotions. I'd left this city determined never to return. Now I was coming back broken in more ways than one, facing surgeries I couldn't afford and a recovery that would derail the independence I'd fought to establish. The train pulled into Union Station as evening fell. I hobbled toward the main exit on crutches, feeling like a defeated soldier returning from a failed campaign. Derek and his wife, Sarah, welcomed me into their suburban home with no questions and no judgment. The guest room became my recovery space after surgery, a procedure that inserted a titanium rod and 6 screws into my shattered leg. The orthopedic surgeon promised I'd walk normally again, but warned the process would take months. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need," Sarah assured me over dinner one week after my operation. "We have plenty of room." "I appreciate it, but I can't impose indefinitely," I replied, uncomfortable with their generosity. "Once I'm mobile enough for crutches, I'll find my own place." Derek exchanged glances with his wife. "About that, Mason, there's something you should know." My stomach tightened. "Is it Grace? Did something happen?" "She's been looking for you," Derek said carefully. "She came to the office about a month after you left, asking if anyone had heard from you." I stared at him, processing this information. "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that I hadn't heard from you. That was before your accident." He hesitated. "She seemed worried, Mason." "Not angry, just concerned." That night, alone in the guest room, I wrestled with this new knowledge. Grace had looked for me. Did that mean she cared, or was she just tying up loose ends? The question haunted me through a restless night. During physical therapy the next day, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Derek told me you're back. We need to talk." Gee, my heart hammered against my ribs. Should I respond? What would I even say? Sorry I disappeared? I wasn't sorry. Leaving had been necessary for my survival. After 3 days of internal debate, I finally texted back. "I'm staying with Derek and Sarah while recovering from surgery. Broke my leg in Michigan." Grace's response came immediately. "Can I visit you?" Those 4 words carried the weight of our entire history. I stared at them until the screen dimmed, then typed, "Yes." The next afternoon, I heard her car pull into Derek's driveway. I was alone in the house, Derek and Sarah having tactfully found errands to run. I positioned myself in the living room, leg propped on pillows, trying to appear casual despite my thundering pulse. The doorbell rang. Drawing a deep breath, I called out, "It's open." Grace stepped inside, hesitating at the threshold. She looked thinner than I remembered, her dark hair shorter, framing a face that showed signs of strain. "Mason," she said softly. "Just my name, nothing more." "Hello, Grace," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. She moved into the room, eyes fixed on my elevated leg with its surgical dressing and metal brackets. "What happened?" "Construction accident. I was working on a deck that collapsed." Grace sat in the armchair across from me. "A deck? You're a designer." "I was a designer," I corrected. "I've been doing whatever pays the bills." She looked around the room, everywhere, but directly at me. "I thought you were dead," she said finally. When weeks passed with no word, I thought. I didn't know what to think. "I wasn't planning to die," I said, attempting humor that fell flat. "I needed space to figure things out. So you just vanished." Grace's voice rose. "Do you have any idea what that did to me? I came home from Diane's expecting an argument, not an empty apartment. Would you let me go if I'd asked?" I challenged. She looked away. "That's not the point." "It's exactly the point. We were destroying each other, Grace." Every conversation became a battle. Every silence was loaded with blame. "So running away was your solution?" Her eyes flashed. "Very mature, Mason." It wasn't about maturity. It was about survival. I shifted, wincing as pain shot through my leg. I was drowning in that apartment, in our marriage. I couldn't breathe anymore. Grace's expression softened slightly at my obvious discomfort. "What happened to us?" she asked, her voice smaller now. "We used to be so good together." "We lost our son," I said simply. "And instead of grieving together, we turned on each other." Grace looked down at her clasped hands. "My therapist says I was punishing you because you weren't there when it happened." "Your therapist?" I hadn't expected that. She nodded. "I started seeing her about a month after you left. I realized I couldn't handle it alone anymore." We sat in silence, the weight of her words settling between us. "I grieve too, Grace," I said finally. "Every day. But you shut me out. You made me feel like my pain didn't count because it wasn't physical." "I know," she whispered. "I was so lost in my own pain I couldn't see yours." Another silence, less tense than before. "What happens now?" Grace asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I need to focus on healing, finding work again, building some kind of life. Alone." The question contained layers of meaning. "That depends," I said, meeting her eyes. "Therapy helped you. Maybe it could help us, if you're willing to try." Hope flickered across her face. "You consider counseling?" "After everything. I never stopped loving you, Grace. I just couldn't keep loving you the way things were." She reached across the space between us, tentatively taking my hand. "I never stopped loving you either. Even when I was furious that you'd left. Even when I thought I might never see you again." Her touch was familiar yet new, like returning to a favorite place, changed by seasons. We were different people now, altered by grief, separation, and the individual journeys we'd taken. Whether those changes would bring us closer or confirm our incompatibility remained to be seen. "One day at a time," I suggested. Grace nodded, squeezing my hand. "One day at a time." As we sat together in borrowed space, I felt something shift. Not a dramatic reconciliation, but a quiet opening, a possibility where before there had been only walls. 1 year after my accident, I stood on my own 2 feet at the Chicago lakefront, watching sunrise paint the water gold. My left leg, though scarred and occasionally stiff, had healed well enough for me to walk without a limp, a minor miracle, according to my surgeon. More miraculous was the path Grace and I had traveled. Weekly counseling sessions had evolved from painful excavations of the past to thoughtful planning for our future. We'd sold the downtown condo, too full of difficult memories, and rented a small house in Evanston with a yard and a garden Grace was bringing back to life. "Sorry I'm late," Grace called, jogging toward me with 2 coffee cups. Line at the cafe was insane. "Worth the wait," I said, accepting the steaming cup and kissing her cheek. These small affections, once routine, then impossible, now felt precious, deliberate choices rather than habits. We walked along the shoreline, shoulders occasionally brushing. Lake Michigan stretched before us, vast and humbling. "I got the promotion," Grace said suddenly. "Creative director for the whole firm." "That's fantastic." I turned to her, genuinely thrilled. Her career had flourished while mine had transformed. After months of freelancing, I'd partnered with a developer to create accessible design tools for non-technical small business owners. The anti-AI approach, as we called it. "It means more travel," she cautioned. "At least initially." "We'll make it work," I assured her. "We're good at adapting now." Grace smiled, slipping her hand into mine. "We've had practice." The path to reconciliation hadn't been smooth. We'd faced setbacks, arguments where old patterns threatened to re-emerge, moments when grief resurfaced unexpectedly. But we'd learned to navigate those waters together, neither drowning nor allowing the other to sink. "I have something for you," Grace said, reaching into her pocket. She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a black and white image, grainy, alien-looking, yet unmistakable. An ultrasound. I looked up, unable to form words. 10 weeks. Grace confirmed, her smile tremulous. Everything looks healthy. The doctor says there's no reason to expect complications. I pulled her into a careful embrace, mindful of what she carried. Are you ready for this? I asked against her hair. Are we? She nodded against my chest. I'm scared, she admitted. But not like before. This time we face it together. We stood holding each other as morning joggers passed and gulls wheeled overhead. The future stretched before us, unwritten but full of possibility. Later, driving home, Grace asked, "Do you ever regret leaving that night?" I considered the question seriously. I regret the pain it caused you, but I don't regret the journey. Without breaking apart completely, I don't think we could have rebuilt something stronger. Grace nodded, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. From endings come beginnings. In the quiet of our car, those simple words captured everything. The loss that had nearly destroyed us, the separation that had ultimately saved us, and the new life now growing between us, a future neither of us had dared to imagine in our darkest days.